What's going on, everybody? This is the Roaming Prepper. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Pete. And the reason I tell you I'm your host, Pete, because you never know, you might have my daughter or someone else in my family one day host. So if that were to happen at some future point, at least you'd know who I was versus whoever takes over the channel as I get older or retire or whatever, which will be a long time from now, by the way. In any case, thank you for joining me today. If you did not catch my Domino Effect part 1, I would recommend you go see that one before we go to part 2. But before I go any further, we're going to talk about the next domino in the Domino Effect, energy. I'll be right back, and let's explain what the Domino Effect is, at least what I'm referring to as the Domino Effect, and how this domino plays into that. So hang on just a second while I go get some coffee. Domino Effect, back to my original line. The Domino Effect series is meant to educate folks into the components that are causing all the economic problems now in 2023, probably into 24 and 25. So we are currently in a post-corona world. It's been a couple of years since almost exactly 3 years since the original shutdowns, and the economy is not right. Inflation's not right. A lot of things are not right, and people don't seem to understand why it is. Everyone kind of knows something's wrong, and they want to blame President Biden or President Trump, but there's so many pieces to it, and it's much more convoluted than simply blaming a president or an administration or a congressman or a company. It's just way more than that. So the domino effect, instead of trying to look at it all holistically and you wind up zigzagging to the different components, I'm trying to break each component down individually so that it would make more sense to you and hopefully to me as well. The first domino video was actually housing, where I covered residential, real estate, and rental. And when I say residential, I mean homeowner versus real estate, the commercial real estate versus rentals like apartments and condos and townhomes. And I may be butchering my own explanation, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Today will be energy. Now, all of these things are interlocked, and as you listen to the videos, hopefully you'll see as I break down the individual components into kind of bite-sized snippets of understanding, or try to make everyone understand. Hopefully you'll start to see how they play together. So energy. Right now, with the current administration, we have had a reduction in drilling in the United States, right? Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of people cite the carbon emissions and whatnot. So let's take a look at some of the carbon emissions, because historically, yeah, as good stewards of our home, the earth, we should obviously be reducing the amount of carbon that we produce. So a lot of people will look at a chart like this. And this runs from 1751, how the hell they measured carbon back then, I don't know, to 1900, which is right here. And actually, let's break out the handy-dandy Roaming Prepper editing pen so I can make edits here. Let's see if I can actually get a magic marker that doesn't look stupid. Okay, so here's 1700s. This is the 1900s. This is pretty much the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. 1950. So in here was World War I and World War II. This is the post-World War economy, right? Now, obviously a lot more carbon. Now this is 35 billion tons up here. This is 5 billion tons up here of carbon. Now, here's what's interesting, and I want you guys to understand this, is this blue right here. That's the United States, or basically North America. So, US and Canada and Mexico. But notice, here's 1950, here's 2018. So this particular chart cuts off right around here, if I'm spitballing it right, it's about the halfway point, so maybe 1975. The greatest growth is China. We've actually reduced our carbon footprint in North America. Now, this is great, right? From an ecological standpoint, we are actually doing what we should be doing and maintaining our planet and et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's the problem. We're increasing our energy breakdown, right? So we're increasing renewables, as you can see here. Oopsie, sorry. Let's try that again. Nope, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Sorry, folks. I'm having technical difficulties here. All right, well, I guess we cannot play with this picture the way I had hoped. So we'll just I guess we'll just stay with that. Okay, so be gone. Renewables and natural gas, nuclear, coal, right? And notice renewables have increased. This is from 2020, and they're estimated 2050. That's what they hope to do, right? Now, what they're hoping to do is make up for the fact that we're using less oil and gas by using more renewables. But here's the problem. Only certain places, now you notice nuclear and coal actually are kind of flat. If anything, they're going down. Problem is the renewables basically become solar, hydro, geothermal, and wind. There are only certain parts of the world where you can actually make that happen. There are only certain parts of the world where you can say, oh, I'm going to put a wind farm here, and it actually creates enough wind consistently to make a base load. So California, offshore Maine-ish, like the high northeast part of the country, and West Texas, okay? And there's certain other places in Oklahoma you could put a viable wind farm. Texas right now is number 1 and number 2 with solar and wind respectively. We're going to pass California and everyone else probably by the end of 2023, if we haven't already done so. I'm going by somewhat slightly older data. By the same token, you can't just throw wind farms into, say, again, Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama on the coast. You get plenty of wind with hurricanes, which will blow all these things down. So you cannot do that. So you're limited with where you could put solar. You're limited with where you could put wind. So we're cutting back on oil and gas. At the same time, we are increasing, or we're trying to increase these 3 alternative energies, but we only have so many places we can put them where it creates sufficient base load. In other words, consistent production, consistent wind, consistent solar, where you can get the output you need. And that's why West Texas is so great for this, because it has oil, it has natural gas, but it has a lot of flat areas that are not being utilized for farming that are perfect for solar and for wind. And we get a lot of wind here just because of our geographical placement. Again, I keep bringing up geography. Your physical location and geography has a large impact on what you're doing. So we've cut back on drilling. And what's interesting is that with the reduction in drilling, what you're starting to see is a lot of oil and gas prices are going up. And this is what's starting to cause problems, right? So you can't build the renewables fast enough, nor enough of it viably to make up for the reduction in oil and gas. So what we wind up doing is we wind up demand is not changing. If anything, it's probably going up, and supply is either decreasing or remaining flat. That's a combination where the supply-demand curve, demand starts going up. You notice the intersection of my hands moves further up. That basically is what is telling us the prices are going up, and we're witnessing it. 5 years ago, not even 4 years ago, the price of gasoline was just under $2. Now, on average, it's 3 to 4. On the coast, is 5 to 6. So, again, this is supply and demand, but it's going to have more significant implications as we go forward, and I'll explain that as well. So, what concerns me is that this is the larger picture of carbon emission. Now, it's funny, you saw the other one, right? And it looked like China just kind of burst at the very end. This is from 1960 until now. This is an expansion of that other chart. Notice up here, the biggest increase, Europe's going down. The Americas seem to be kind of flat. They increased a bit. The big increase is in Asia. China is not part of any ecological or environmental agreement. So like the Paris Accord, they're not immune. They didn't sign it, to my knowledge. So we, in the meantime, are crushing our own economy. Well, one of our greatest competitors and a geopolitical threat, and our friends over in the Pacific, is actually increasing the consumption. And what's ironic, a lot of what they're using is coal, and not good high quality coal like we'd find in Pennsylvania and the Appalachians, where it has very few contaminants. We're talking, and coal's kind of a dirty fuel in general. Increasing their carbon output because they're burning way more fuel, trying to motivate their economy. In the meantime, we, Europe, all the Western nations are trying to do the opposite and clean up, which is great from an ecological standpoint and from a, environmental standpoint. But then it forces us to start doing things like pulling from our petroleum reserve. And this is a chart of the petroleum reserve, right? So here's 1980. Oh, no, let me see if I can. There we go. Okay, so here, let me get my little handy dandy pen here. This is 1985. This is 2020. This is roughly, so it ends a little bit early. So this should be roughly 2022, if I'm reading the chart right. But here's what's concerning to me, what bothers me, is, and this is not today, right? This is sometime middle of last year. We went from 600 million barrels of reserve. We're down to 400, and I think at this point we're at 3 to 2, so we're down here as of today. Okay, that's our strategic reserve. For those of you unfamiliar with it, this is oil and gas, specifically oil, that has been purified and is stored either underground, in tanks, in natural formations in the earth, in various parts of the country, for use during a crisis. For example, COVID, that made sense. You utilize some of this. But not only did we drop off during COVID, we've then, in order to reduce inflation, we kept pulling from the strategic reserve to keep gasoline prices down. This was largely a symbolic move because 600 million is not enough really to move the needle very much for the US of A. But let's put the pieces together. So we're trying to have more green energy in the West, which is great. We're trying to keep the environment clean, which is great. But at the same time, what we're doing is pulling from our strategic reserves, and we're creating inflation by increasing our fuel price. Then it gets unsustainable, so the solution is to deplete our petroleum reserves. In the meantime, we have a shooting war in Eastern Europe with an ally or pseudo-ally and our competitor Russia. And then we have China threatening to take Taiwan and fight with the Philippines and Japan in the other side of the world. And as of 2021, give or take, based on this chart, we reduced our petroleum reserve by almost 30% while we're getting into this geopolitical catfight. You see how that leads to a problem. So we didn't build several pipelines to bring natural gas and oil from the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, which could fuel New York and DC significantly with natural gas. They refused to build it because New York State didn't want this pipeline built to the city. Pennsylvania would do it, New York State wouldn't. So we have these vast reserves that we can't export and we can't bring to our own cities. We're reducing our own energy production, creating an inflationary effect. Now, the inflationary effect also has to do with monetary policy and printing too much money, which I cover in the first video, and I'm going to cover again later by itself as monetary policy. But when you look at this, we're actually setting ourselves up to fail. The renewables, we cannot build enough that create enough base load or consistent load into the grid to make up for the loss of oil and gas. Not yet. Now, does that mean we shouldn't do it? No, it doesn't. But what it means is that right now, in a critical time when our economy is suffering, inflation's getting insane, and we have geopolitical threats, we're hurting our own economy. In the meantime, as you saw China's use in carbon, you could tell if they're burning up, creating that much carbon emission, they're burning up fuel left and right. They're not stopping, and they're not constrained by the Paris Accords. And you see how that kind of sets us up to fail. To add to the fact, what it's doing is instead, we've depleted our strategic reserve such that in the event we get into a war, God forbid, we're going to struggle with how we're going to fuel our equipment, because understand, any war that breaks out now, even if nukes are not used, can come home. These two near peer or peer competitors in China and Russia are more than capable of coming over and torpedoing ships, doing rocket attacks on the Brooklyn Navy Yard, on Lower Manhattan. They can go and tear up Houston Harbor. They can go and shoot up the Loop, which is the Louisiana Oil Platform Exchange. They can go in and put rockets on the Los Angeles port and really screw up our ability to import stuff. So you see how this is not a war of the past. This is something that can come home to us, and we're depleting our own reserves that are meant for this kind of purpose. Not only that, we're creating an inflationary effect between our financial choices and the printing of money and reducing energy consumption. And that, as I pointed out in the first video, is not only making housing unsustainable, but then it's creating a general consumer price index and cost. So here's the cost of electricity is green, and black is all other items in the household. This is the consumer price index. There's 2020, the CPI was under 10. Now we're looking at 20% for all other things and over 30% for energy, electricity. That's not sustainable, right? So if you don't have a long-term contract in your electrical provider, you're actually hurting yourself. And you see how these dominoes come together. So the energy policy is adding to inflation. The monetary policy, which I'll cover separately, adding to inflation. All this inflation is making housing and office space unsustainable for businesses and for individuals, and is causing those markets to crash. You see how all these dominoes kind of interact with each other. And I'm not doing a great job of explaining because there are a lot of small nuances between these components, but you kind of see this energy policy thing is really setting us up for failure. Does it mean we shouldn't pursue green and alternative? Absolutely not. But we really need to be realistic about how we're going about it, because what we're doing is setting our economy up to crash at a time where we might wind up in an open conflict with a near peer. And that won't be pretty. Will we win? Probably. But it's going to be ugly. That would be one of those things that would change the country forever. It would change many countries forever, and not in a good way. So I don't understand the logic here. Now here's your takeaway. How do we prepare for this, right? We don't, unless you happen to drill oil and gas or you have a solar plant. There's certain things you can do. Now, if you're trying to live off-grid or homestead, you could install your own solar setups. Right? Now that's a lot of investment up front, but then it takes you off the grid. Then you're your own sustainability. You can do longer term contracts in your energy, like your natural gas or your electricity with your whatever company provider you have. Do a 1, 2, 3 year. This is actually what I did. I knew gas prices were going to go up because I work in the energy sector. Back in 2021, I was like, I'll sign a 2-year lease. But my rationale at the time was, as things are going to open up, the economy will take off, fuel prices go up. That just made sense to me. I wasn't factoring in the Russia thing. I wasn't factoring in the China thing. That was just pragmatic, what was in front of me. As they open businesses up, energy gets used, the price will go up. Demand and supply, done. But that worked in my favor, because then when energy took off, my electrical rates were flat, while my neighbors were paying, I was paying maybe $150 a month, maybe a little bit closer to 200 in the summer, because it gets hot here in Texas. Some of my neighbors were paying 600-700 because they had this adjustable rate thing, which is super cheap when it's good, but when it's not good, you get clobbered. Speaking of homes, another thing you can do is insulate your home, upgrade your windows, or reduce leaks in your house. All that reduces the use of the air conditioner and or heater. Switch to LED bulbs. That reduces electrical pull in your home. Also for your vehicle, make sure your vehicle has its tune-up, clean spark plugs, good tires. Keep your vehicle in running shape. The better condition your vehicle is, the less fuel you're going to use. We can't control these bigger geopolitical issues, but we can control certain things that will reduce our exposure. But again, there's certain steps you can do to take the pain away from this. Again, keep your vehicle working, keep your cars working the best they can, keep your house insulated, change lighting to reduce your electrical consumption. In the winter, don't use the heater as much, just throw on a hoodie and put the thermostat a little bit lower. Things you can do to reduce your risk. In any case, folks, that's it for part 2 of the domino effect, the energy sector. I'm going to be doing part 3 here soon, and they're going to be about 5 or 6 parts when it's all done. And yeah, it's going to be, this is a complex subject, but I'm trying to take the components apart so that you guys can see each intricacy and then understand how they play together. So folks, until next time, God bless, Godspeed. I will see you all on the next video. Take care of yourselves and take the steps. Even little steps over time make a big difference. I will see you later.